Thank you everyone for joining us, this esteemed panel led by our good friend Ambassador Ido and friends from around the world. We expect a great and lively discussion. I just want to note that if we have any questions, you see the Q&A link at the bottom of your screen. I note that this is being recorded and will be uploaded onto our various social media and YouTube channels. So with that, I'll hand it over to our host and Master of Ceremonies, Ido. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nick, and thank you for inviting me. And I'd like to thank my colleagues from APCO Worldwide for putting this together, as well as the wonderful and able team of Concordia Summit, a gathering that I greatly admire for many years. The Eastern Mediterranean region includes Cyprus, Greece, the Palestinian Authority, Gaza Strip, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Turkey, Egypt, and of course, Israel. This is quite an interesting cluster of nations with a mixed bag of conflicting self-interests combined with a long list of common goals. Today, what we would like to do, we have with this world-class panel that you all participants received the bios, so I'm not going to read all the bios. Let me just introduce our panelists very, very briefly, and then what I'm going to do is introduce three questions, separate general questions for the panelists. They will be answering briefly according to the order of introduction. And then if we have enough time, we will engage in individual questions as well as Q&A from the rest of the participants. So our first panelist is the Honorable Alexandra Papadopoulou, Ambassador of Greece to the United States. She's a legal expert with specialty in international law and political science. Previously, she served our country's cabinet, served as top diplomatic envoy to the European Union, Uruguay, Paraguay, United Nations, Canada, Kosovo, Jordan, and the United States. She was in New Orleans, one of my favorite places. Our second panelist, his Honorable Ambassador Andreas Mavroyiannis, permanent representative of Cyprus to the United Nations, has held his current post since July of 2019. Since 2013, he has served as a negotiator of the Greek-Cypriot community in the intercommunal talks on the settlement of the Cyprus problem. Other diplomatic posts were held in EU, Ireland, France, and several cabinet-level positions. He is a professor of public international law at Frederick University in Cyprus. Our third panelist, who is not with us yet, but hopefully she will join us shortly.
She is here.
Is here, Federica Saini, a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. She is a historian specializing in counterinsurgency and asymmetric wars. Her fieldwork and research have covered, among others, Afghanistan, Libya, and the Horn of Africa. She's the author of many books. She won global acclaim for her sharp analysis of war and diplomacy. She consulted the United States Secretary of Defense on Libya and testified in front of the House of Representatives Committee on Foreign Affairs on the very same subject. Our fourth panelist is the reason why we're all here, one of the founders of the Concordia Summit, co-founder and chairman of the board. He's also a member of the executive board of the Libra Group, and the main reason we're all here, Nicholas is a member of the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London, the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., the Overseas Club, and is also a graduate of the George Washington University, also in D.C. Last but not least, my dear friend, Major General retired Yaacov Amidror, who's a former National Security Advisor of Israel. He is a globally renowned expert on intelligence and global security. He's currently serving as a senior fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategic Studies and a distinguished fellow of JINSA's Gemunder Center in Washington. He's a 36-year veteran of Israel's military and oversaw major technology and intelligence projects for the Israel Defense Forces. He's a prolific author, and his articles appear frequently in Israeli and international publications. Welcome to all five panelists. We have only 1 hour, so we will try to squeeze in as much as we can. The first question that I have for the entire panel, and we will answer the question according to the order of my introduction, obviously refers to the biggest piece of news today in the world, the Biden-Harris ticket. In your assessment, what could a Biden administration mean for the future of the Eastern Mediterranean region? We'll start with you, Ambassador Papadopoulou.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to participate in such an interesting discussion with panelists, some of whom I already know and some of whom I've heard about. Before I give you my thoughts about the Biden-Harris administration, I would like to raise another point. You spoke about the Eastern Mediterranean region and the countries that form the Eastern Mediterranean region, which is correct, of course. But in today's world, I don't think we can speak about Eastern Mediterranean stricto sensu. We have to expand a little and include in all our considerations the countries of the immediate neighborhood of the Eastern Mediterranean, which is going from all the way from the Gulf countries to Iran and the Caucasus, coming a little west to the Balkans, because these are areas that affect each other, and I don't think that there can be a decision, let's say by Israeli government about Eastern Mediterranean without taking into consideration the Iranian factor or the Gulf factor. So just a general remark. What the Biden-Harris administration will mean. Number one, usually I don't want to make focus about what any government is going to decide or the course of action they're going to take for one basic reasons, because nobody can foresee events on the ground. But as a general remark, first of all, the U.S. interests are the same, regardless of who is living in the White House. And every country's interests are defined by objective factors like geography, economy, etc. But the Biden-Harris administration, I think the main difference that we might see that they're going to be more institutional. And by that, I will mean the reemergence of the State Department in a very focal role, together, of course, with NSC. The supremacy of the institutional voices within the administration. President Trump had, of course, there was the State Department, NSC, Defense Department, but also he had a personal, also non-institutional, let's put it like that, approach to issues. But this, and of course, there was always a balancing act, and sometimes it was institutional approach, and sometimes it was not institutional approach. I think with the Biden-Harris administration, the institutional approach will have a different weight, bigger weight. Another difference that we might see is that it's going to be a more less transactional and more principles-based approach. Of course, even with the present administration, the United States always values and puts at the forefront human rights, religious freedom, especially religious freedom was a basic component of President Trump's foreign policy. But a rule of law, but human rights, if I want to put it in a different way, the present administration was cherry picking issues from the principles. The Biden-Harris administration will be more prone to the supremacy of human rights and rule of law as a foreign policy indicator. When what you value in foreign policy, human rights and rule of law will have a very, very big role. Another difference that we might see is going to be more partnership-like approach to foreign policy, together with allies, long-term allies. And in this regard, I speak more about the European Union, the United States, working hand in hand. Of course, the EU and the United States, the relationship didn't stop with the Trump administration, but there were some bumps. And sometimes it's not that we have different perspectives. Sometimes we had different tools. I think the Biden-Harris administration will try to iron the differences of approach, because we all agree that we have the same demands, the same goals. And in this framework, I would like to put also NATO. And because EU, NATO, and common defense, I think the new administration, before taking any major decision, will be more inclined to consult with allies and partners in Europe, in the European Union. And I think the relationship between the EU and the US is going to be a very crucial first test of what the Biden-Harris administration is going to pursue in their foreign policy priorities. I think.
Thank you so much. Ambassador Mavroyiannis.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you all. I'm very happy to be with you. I will start by saying that I agree with Ambassador Papadopoulou on everything she said, but more so and in particular when she pleaded for widening the concept of what is Eastern Mediterranean in our approach. And I also believe that certainly we need to include some other players that really with their policies and their actions affect our part of the world. I will not repeat the same arguments as that she mentioned. I would like just to say that it's not that we are complaining about the current administration, but it is true that the current administration was, as Alexandra was saying, cherry picking or working on a case-by-case policy. I myself, I had the opportunity once in Washington to ask about what is your policy towards Turkey, and my interlocutors were telling me, there is no real policy. There are decisions on a case-by-case basis, and it will be up to the journalists, the academics to say and define what our policy is. So we're going to go back now to a more traditional approach, if you like, and we count a lot, to be very honest with you, on this new approach, and we believe that, President-elect Biden will bring things back to a more tight relationship with Europe and a more, if you like, a policy of investing more in our part of the world, because we need to understand that for us, the waning American presence in the Eastern Mediterranean may be contributed to phenomena like the hegemonic ambitions of Turkey, etc. When there is a vacuum, there is always an authoritarian regime that will try to step in. So I expect a lot of mainstreaming by the new administration. We have also the advantage, and this is very important, that Mr. Biden knows the area well. To take my own case, he visited Cyprus 6 years ago. He tried even to help for the Cyprus problem, to push forward the process. And I know that there was a kind of an approach of creating a space of economic and energy cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean during the Obama administration. Though, very frankly and honestly, in this context, we need to recognize that, Mr. Obama started by praising Turkey and considering that it was a role model for all Muslim countries, and it would play a very constructive role. And what we have seen is not exactly this. Thank you very much, Ido.
Thank you so much. Ms. Saini, please.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and sorry because it's not my name, but it's my daughter's name. So that's why you couldn't see me before. So regarding this question, let's say that I cannot add anything else from the two excellence here, the two ambassadors. I can just say that regarding what Ambassador Papadopoulou said, I completely agree with her, but I should add also, of course, my area of interest, which is the Maghreb and Libya, above all. When we talk about, of course, Eastern Mediterranean, we cannot talk about the whole Mediterranean basin, which is so important for us. And at this point, also for Turkey in many respects. Ambassador Mavroyiannis was talking about a new, let's say, more traditional way of doing foreign policy by the United States. And I completely agree, because Biden is a man of experience in this way and in foreign relations for sure. So I guess that also, given the extraordinary group that they are putting together in every possible way, internal and foreign, I think that it will be more systematic, and probably we will see finally a strategy here for the Mediterranean by the United States and also for Africa. But I would like to remember also that at the beginning, the Biden-Harris task will be very complicated internally. And so we will see a Biden presidency probably more focused on internal problems like the economy, like COVID, of course, like the racial and social problem, and of course climate change. These four pillars will be, I think, but I don't have, the crystal ball, but I think that will be, at least at the beginning of this presidency, the core and the target. I leave the floor.
Thank you so much. Nick, please, our fearless leader.
Sorry. Thank you very much. It's difficult to follow all that insight, but I'll just say I'm not an ambassador, so maybe I can be a little bit less diplomatic, and just sort of talk. I mean, I think that there has been some disappointment in the Trump administration as it relates to the engagement over the couple of years, especially as it relates to Turkey. Going forward, I would just note what the other panelists have said and sort of give a little bit of my own experience, which is, Joe Biden is very engaged in this region personally. I mean, Concordia had the honor of hosting him in Greece in 2017. I believe that was the last time he was there. But from working with him when he was vice president through his post vice presidency and then through the campaign, he really is personally interested in this, and that's not something you can say. This being the region, and that's not something you can say for most U.S. presidents. The old joke that he tells, and I'm sure he has one of these for all different communities that he speaks to, but he calls himself Joe Bidenopoulos, and the reason is clear that throughout his life he's been engaged with the community and the region, and so I would say that's not something to be discounted. It's very important, and his staff as well, Tony Blinken, Mike Carpenter, all of these people who we expect to take positions in the administration will really know about the region, and I think that will be beneficial for all the countries involved. There seems to have been some affinity on behalf of the current president for the current president of Turkey, which I don't see continuing in the Biden administration. At least, obviously, Turkey is a partner of the United States, and that will continue. But I think the personal affinity will revert back to more, let's say, a professional relationship.
Thank you. Major General Amidror.
Good evening, and thank you to invite me to this very interesting panel. I think that the old words of Choi and Lai are very applicable here. It's too early to judge. We really don't know. But what we can say by instinct that it will be more institutional approach. But at the same time, all the priorities that we can see now are not connected to this region. It's domestic issues, as was mentioned. And when it is coming to foreign relations, no question that China as a challenge, Russia as a problem, will be first in the list of foreign relations. And then maybe the Mediterranean, Middle East, and so on and so forth. So I think that whatever will be the approach, it will not be in the high priority of this administration. I agree that they will look for more cooperations and way to engage with other countries. And this is why the European Union view about problems in our area like Turkey, aggressiveness, and so on and so forth will be very important, because this administration will look for more cooperation with the European system. And one of the issues that will be raised by European countries and maybe by the European Union is Turkey. And I agree that the personal affiliation that could be more important under the previous administration will not be there in the future. The disappointed view of President Obama about Erdogan is known. He thought that he is someone that can be an example of symbol of moderation, and he understood that he is not. And I'm sure that the vice president shared the same views about the Turkish ruler. And this is why I believe that if the Turkish aggressiveness will continue same level it is today, and of course if it will intensified in the future, the Americans will be more determined to stop it. Although, again, this administration is not going to invest in areas that look like are not giving any success to the United States of America, and if that will look too complicated, problematic, with no clear solution, I don't see the American investing here. And at the end of the day, we will have to solve the problems of this area between ourselves, those countries which are around this part of the Mediterranean. Yes, there are areas which have some influence on the area, but at the end, it's not Iran which will determine what will happen in this part of the world, and it will be between the countries which are close to each other geographically: Egypt, Israel, Cyprus, Greece, the Palestinians, and those who will have the interest to share or to come into the club. I heard that the Emirates applied to be members of the Gaz Forum in Cairo. They are more than welcome. We brought in, we as a group brought in Jordan, because we think that Jordan is a very important element in the stabilization of the Middle East. But these are the countries. I don't see the Iranians are coming in, and I don't see us as a group speaking about Iran and what Iran should do and what we should do to Iran. At the end, this is, I don't think that will be the main issue here. I think that the Americans will be very cooperative when it will come to joint ventures between those countries, between this side of the Mediterranean and the European side of the Mediterranean. I think that this administration will look at it very positively, because this is an example of cooperation that they can show has significant implication for the region and giving benefit to countries which America has the interest that they will be benefited from the new administration approach to the international, in the international arena. So I think that all the big projects that people here in this in the East Mediterranean have in mind to initiate, I think that would be supported by the Americans.
Thank you. And I think that there's a consensus among the panelists that the incoming U.S. administration will have bigger fish to fry than the Eastern Mediterranean or other regional issues, and that they will begin their work with COVID-19, which is a beautiful segue to the second question that I'd like to pose to the panelists. COVID-19 and the economic devastation that will follow the health crisis will definitely and already has impaired the competitiveness of many of the countries in our region, especially those whose economies were relying heavily on tourism. Question is, what in your mind, in your assessment, should those countries do in order to quickly recover from the crisis? We'll start again with you.
To get a good vaccine.
Well, assuming that there is going to be either a treatment or best case scenario, a vaccine that is proven and safe. We don't know, but assuming that one day we will get over this hump, and the question is, what can we do now? What should we do in the future in order to overcome and compensate for this economic devastation?
You know, this is a very interesting point, but I don't think the repercussions of COVID-19 are mainly economic. If it was purely economic, the problem afterwards, I think eventually, sooner or later, the answer could be, okay, normal, we would find a way. But I think, like in all times in history, when we have big epidemics, these epidemics bring about historical forces, social forces and political forces that are lying behind, dormant, and also expedited developments and changes and brings them to the forefront in an abrupt manner, so it destabilizes what we know as our normalcy. So I think the main repercussions that we're going to see following the COVID-19 will be mainly social and political, and of course economic are intertwined with them. I think in our societies, especially in what we call the Western world, our societies have been seeing their ways of life being threatened even before COVID-19. Like I will speak about Europe, where the social state has seen a lot of ups and downs, and the generations of Europeans, including my own generation, post-World War generations, who were accustomed in a certain way of life and a certain support system, they found themselves completely lost without it. Also in the United States, I followed very closely the Black Lives Matter movement, and in my view, racism was one of the issues in the whole movement. It was not the only issue. And I see through this movement, I saw the unfolding of the American dream about the middle class Americans. And this is the same in Europe. So we see that globalization went to reach them as far as it could reach, but it was very, very good for our society. And of course, I don't mean that this is something that should stop, but it had some social and political side effects that now are just accentuated by COVID-19. So what we see socially is we see some trends. One of them is the tendency of people to become very conservative in their attitudes toward the world. Because when people feel threatened, they become suspicious and they become introvert. You see societies that see their whole life, what their expectations about life falling apart, and they become aggressive. You see political systems that they cannot answer basic questions of average people. And usually, a lot of times, we have the tendency to disregard these tendencies, or to look up, frown upon them, that, okay, they're not very well educated, they don't understand the world, this and that. But we cannot, societies are not made only for by highly educated people who can understand and give intellectual answers to problem. The main part of society are people who cannot give intellectual answers, but they want to live and they want to protect their families, and they go back to instinctive answers and instinctive actions. And the political system in Europe or in the United States hasn't found a way yet to give basic answers. We have to question ourselves. Trump and a lot of other leaders in Europe were elected based on a certain agenda. And this agenda a lot of people believed in this agenda. Even now, 4 years later, President Trump got 72 million voters. This is not something we can overlook. They say something. And what they say becomes it's accentuated by COVID-19. So in my view, the main problem after COVID-19 is to answer the social questions, the social and political problems. And of course, economy is a huge part of it, but it's not the only part of it. Our societies are changing. Our world is changing drastically. The international security system, which was built after the Second World War, is crumbling, or maybe the word crumbling is a strong word, but it's changing. So the answers have to be multifaceted and cover everything, not only economy.
Thank you. And I just would like to sharpen the point here. I believe what you're talking about is the collapse or the fact that the old social order that was designed late 19th century, early 20th century became obsolete. It was not sustainable even before COVID-19. COVID-19 exposed the systemic deficiencies. And in that regard, you're absolutely correct. It's also social and economic and cultural and so on. Ambassador Mavroyiannis, please.
Thank you. Certainly, COVID-19 has gravely affected the economies all around the world, but here we're talking more about the Eastern Mediterranean. And here, of course, you have countries, as you said, Ido, that mainly rely on tourism. And of course, tourism industry has completely collapsed. To give you an example, my own country, Cyprus, 90% of tourism has disappeared. So you understand that under those circumstances, it's very difficult for a country to, if you like, to continue business as usual. And of course, when it affects also the relationship with parties and countries in the region. For instance, between where you are and where I am right now, we are trying to manage to synchronize ourselves. Sometimes you have, a wave of COVID in Israel. We are in control in Cyprus, and it is the other way around. So there are a lot of difficulties. One has to add for Cyprus and certainly for Greece, and probably for other countries in the region, that we barely started recovering from the economic crisis that started in the aftermath of the 2020 crisis in the United States. So, and now we were close to a situation where we would say, okay. But with COVID, of course, everything is put back into question, and there will need to be a huge effort in order to put things back to normal. At the same time, of course, it's not only the economic situation. Alexandra is right. There are new social dynamics that have been created, new forces that have been unleashed from this new crisis. And we need all of us, to go through a new, test in the 21st century to see whether we can have relevant answers to the new situation. And of course, this economic situation and the problems that have been created to some extent will accentuate also the political issues in the area. And energy or hydrocarbons, or be it whatever, you name it, under those conditions, that very often some aggressive states find an excuse to go back to this traditional concept of international relation, the notion of maximizing national resources, gets a new context. So this is what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. Federica, please.
Yeah, I'm not, a sociologist, and I'm not an economist. So for me, it will be more an historical answer. And watching, of course, the pandemic, many are the points of contact with the very big pandemic that we had 1 century ago, the Spanish flu. And of course, watching it, the situation and the future cannot be very pink and serene in many respects. I see, of course, as our two ambassadors said, tensions, social tensions that are pushed by economy. We are in a huge crisis, and above all here in the Mediterranean, where we have a huge part of the economy coming from tourism. In Italy, of course, where I live, the situation is really difficult in this moment. And of course, with these economic problems, we have social problems, and of course, this will have a profound security impact. We can see this, for example, even in Turkey. We are now talking about the Mediterranean basin, and the panel is focused on the East Mediterranean, and we can see how usually these kind of big internal problems, like the Turkish ones, economy, politics, and so on, become something more and more ideological. And the only way to distract the public opinion, the internal public opinion, is being aggressive. And so I'm, as an historian, I do not want to be too bad, but I'm really worried. And I left the stage.
Yeah, I would just want to add to that. There's a very prominent public diplomacy researcher from the University of Southern California who coined the term informational distancing. One of the ways to cope with COVID-19 is not only to maintain social distancing, but also to avoid the situation of information overload, which increases anxiety and obviously is one of the biggest problems that we have. Nick, please.
Thank you. I think I agree with everything that the previous guests have said. I mean, from our perspective, just looking at the economic damage, and obviously we've all read in the past couple of weeks with great happiness what we hope will be, I think now 3 as of this morning. The AstraZeneca vaccine was announced as effective. The Moderna and the Pfizer and the AstraZeneca vaccine, the cover of The Economist was a light at the end of the tunnel, because this pandemic has really upended life in ways that I don't think any of us could have imagined. Obviously, first and foremost, it's a physical health crisis in the sense of people are dying, but it is also, I think, a mental health crisis. There's a lot of people who are suffering. in silence. Life has been turned upside down. We're not seeing our friends. We're not meeting people. We're not, there's no human contact. And I think up until the news of the vaccines, which hopefully will continue, over the next couple of months will be delivered. Up until that point, we didn't really have an end to this. The next couple of months are going to be very difficult, especially in the places where it gets cold. There's just great fatigue out there for people to do the right thing, to wear a mask, social distance, all of that. But I totally agree that this matter, this COVID crisis, in the same way, but even greater, that the 2008 financial crisis, we're still feeling effects from it today in that same way, but much greater, will have profound effects. And I think the difference, if we were having this conversation, as I said 3 weeks ago, would be now, touching wood, touching everything, now we see sort of an end to this, and we can start to think of what life will be like after it. And so it's a very timely question for sure.
Major General, please.
3 remarks. First, I agree that it is social problem as big as the issue of the epidemic itself. But 3 remarks to it. One, it is a very crucial time. Now we have a basic timetable that give us the frame through which we have to make all the plans for the future. Now we know that within year and a half, the vaccine will be spread enough to protect most of the people in the Western world, at least. And we will be in a position that we can resume the normality. And what is the imperative now for government is to prepare in the next, the plan for the next 18 months, which will bring us to a better situation to really resume normality after this period. Now, when we have a frame of time, this is the exact time to put the plans on the tables and to be sure that at least economically and socially, every government has a clear vision how to cope with this 18 months and to prepare itself and the country for the change after the vaccine will spread within the population. First. Second, I think that at the end of the day, each country will have to cope with the problem, with the challenges by itself. It is not something that you can get from outside, that you can import to your system. Each country with its unique system will have to cope with the problems and to find the solutions by itself, for itself. But, and this is a big but, and it is connected to this form, we can help each other if we will cooperate and find ways to enhance the economy of each of us and to do it together. Big project relating to energy, big project relating to tourism, big project relating to food, and so on and so forth. If we cooperate in our area in which we can cooperate and find ways that every big project will contribute to more than one country, that will be a very important step within the frame of time that I spoke was my first remark. We have to use it as an opportunity to conclude all the agreements and to begin to fulfill the promises that we did in the past, and the meaning of it are big project between ourselves.
Thank you for this very important point, the last point that you made. I think that many of the people on this panel and the participants are students of history and teachers of history would agree that one of the common responses of humanity to traumas and big crises such as the pandemic is a more collaborative form of international relations, which is what happened after World War II and in many other instances. And that's what several of you predicted. Let me
one remark, if I may. The problem is there is no someone like Marshall today. The Marshall Plan is not in the cards. No country is ready to do what was done by the Americans after the Second World War. We have to help ourselves. And if we cooperate, we can build a Marshall Plan for ourselves, the countries around this part of the Mediterranean. And if we will cooperate, we can do it.
And that's a beautiful segue to my next question. I would ask the panelists really to limit your question to a very brief time, because I'd like to add time for other questions that are coming in from our guests and participants. We spoke about who's capable of introducing a Marshall Plan, certainly in our part of the world. And that obviously brings up the question of China. And where do you see China, and how do you see China's role in the region, certainly in light of recent occurrences, the pandemic and the Biden-Harris ticket? Please, Ambassador Papadopoulou.
I think China is the most important issue of our times, how to deal with China. Speaking about the US, this is an issue that is also a domestic issue, has domestic connotations, and it's an issue that faces bipartisan. It's a bipartisan approach, and I haven't seen any Democrat or Republican having any disagreement over the importance of China, and the importance of China in a positive and in a negative way at the same time. In order to speak about China and our part of the world, you have to see it also through the eyes of the American administration, whichever, Republican or Democratic, to the extent that it's correct that the world has entered a superpower competition. Then how we deal with China in our part of the world goes through Washington. We have to see how Washington faces China, how Brussels is going to face China, and then our part of the world, how we're going to face China. Two of the panelists in this meeting, myself and Andreas Mavroyiannis, we represent members of the European Union. So our relationship with China definitely goes through the approach that Brussels is going to adopt. There are two ways to go about it. Either you go in a cooperative manner, like China is part of the world system. Of course, China demands it's the place they want in this international system, the world system, but China is a partner and we have to accommodate it and deal with it. And there is another approach that is more of a superpower competition, and then we have to contain China. The debate is going on. There is no clear answer, but no matter what, and one of the panelists said before that, of course, the Middle East and our Eastern Mediterranean is not the #1 priority for the United States, which is correct. But at the same time, if you want to contain China, because in my view, the final product of policy will be a mixture of containment and cooperation, and then the administration will have to see what is the percentage in this of one and the other in this mixture. Then this has to take place in different parts of the world. It cannot be done in Washington. It cannot be done in Beijing. And there, when you come to that, then our region has a role and becomes important. Our region becomes important in two ways. Number one, because if you want to deal with China, it goes also through our bigger region, and also because our region can produce enough trouble so to stop and affect the bigger picture and the bigger problem. And in our region also we have the destabilizer in chief, which is Turkey, and through their policies, and I don't want to go in that direction now, it can create so much trouble that it can affect and draw the attention by everybody else, and even opening a bigger space for China to get in, exactly because our region in the Eastern Mediterranean, but in the bigger way, is the gates to our world.
Absolutely. That's why this panel is so important. Ambassador Mavroyiannis, please.
Thank you. Very briefly, certainly, we were expecting the 21st century to be a century where we would have a more multipolar world, but more and more we understand that we have a new bipolar world between the United States and China. And certainly China becomes in the international arena much more active and more assertive year after year, not only in the economic field where they work with everybody around the world. And I mean, one example was their recent Belt and Road initiative, which involved so many countries around the world, but also in the diplomatic field, the political field in general, everywhere they are present. As Alexandra was saying, as European Union, we opt more towards a kind of, partnership approach with China, of course, with our eyes wide open. We have the feeling that more and more the American approach is kind of containment approach, as Alexandra was saying, and we need to find some complementarity between the two. Of course, we need also to see how, what are the repercussions of this in our part of the world, because, for instance, let's take the sanctions regimes, American sanctions against Iran, the problems in Syria, in Iraq, in the whole part of this world, and including, countries of former Eastern Europe, how effective you can be if you have, at the other end, China, working with the countries you try to sanction and undermining everything you can do. This is just a small example, but the Chinese, they are very smooth operators all over the world, including in our area. And we are going to see as time goes by that they will become more and more assertive also in our part of the world. And we see, for instance, it's true for Greece, it's true for Cyprus, the fact that we are members of the European Union, they try to use us a kind of a hub in order to have access into the European Union. But I mean, those are just very few elements. I don't want to say more. We don't have much time. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much. And you're absolutely correct about the time. We have 7 more minutes and 3 responses from our esteemed panelists. Federica, please.
Okay, I will be very quick. And the problem is, answering to Ambassador Papadopoulou, I agree absolutely with her. But the problem is, do the United States, and this is a question also for her, understand that China is more and more intrusive in the Mediterranean and in Africa also. I observe Africa daily and it's impressive. It's a completely different way of action, for example, compared to Russia in Africa. So do the United States have a strategy of containment in the Mediterranean for China? This is my question to all our panelists.
Thank you so much. Nick.
Thank you. I'll be very brief and just to say, from a domestic political perspective in the United States, I think there's this notion that, President Trump was very tough on China. That was something that he ran on. That was something that he has talked about for many years before he came to the White House. He started a trade war and then sort of ended it, and then COVID came. And I think it's important to dispel any notion that the Biden-Harris administration will be soft on China, or, in my personal view, I think they will continue with some of the trade policies of the Trump administration. I think they'll engage with China in a different way. Obviously, it's a different style versus Trump. No tweeting diplomacy, but I do think that the U.S.-China tensions will continue in the same vein as you've seen over the past couple of years. And I think that's important to keep in mind.
Just as global competition will probably intensify post-COVID-19.
Yeah.
Major General Amidror, please.
no question that the tension between the United States of America and China is an issue that should be taken into account when we are making decisions. From the Israeli perspective, it is clear that for us, there is no substitute to our special relations with the United States of America. And I know that the Chinese understand it. Maybe they don't like it, but they understand it. It's clear for them. And we are doing, and we will do in the future, whatever will be needed to keep these special relations with the United States of America. At the same time, we don't want to give up and to take from any possibility the relations with China, which is a very important country that can be a good partner in some areas. So we have to be very flexible, but from the Israeli perspective, it's clear, America first.
Thank you so much, Major General Amidror, and I'd like to thank all the panelists for their time, for sharing their experience, their wisdom, their knowledge, and their expertise. We're right on time, finishing the panel right on time. I'd like to thank my dear friends at the Concordia Summit, the Logothetis family, and especially Nick, who took the time to be with us, as well as my dear colleagues from APCO Worldwide that worked very hard to put together this panel. Thank you so much. This is going to be available also on video online, so you can share it with your friends. Thank you so much and have a great day.